This program is brought to you by realestate.com.au, Australia's #1 address in property. With more properties for sale than anywhere else, we make it easier.
Welcome back. Let's take a look at this week's auction numbers. There are about 2,400 auctions scheduled to take place across the country. That's down just 2% when compared to the same time last year. Sydney will hold 687 auctions. That's up 23% on last year. There'll also be 181 auctions in regional New South Wales. Melbourne has about 1,000 auctions scheduled, with another 55 in regional Victoria. Brisbane will hold 128 auctions, plus another 114 in regional Queensland. Adelaide's set to have 114 auctions, plus another 5 in regional South Australia. And Canberra will hold 110 auctions. Taking a look at the most viewed properties going to auction this weekend, and topping the list is 10 Wilpena Terrace in Kilkenny, a suburb in northern Adelaide. This home was built in the 1865 and still has some of the original features, but it looks like the current owner is selling up halfway through a renovation. Then it's over to Melbourne to 16 McGuinness Road, Bentley East. This three-bedder has a price guide of up to $750,000. Next is 8 Silverwater Crescent, Miranda in Sydney's Sutherland Shire. This four-bedder has a price guide of up to $1.25 million. Then it's another Sydney property, 10 Tarilli Place in Kellyville. This four-bedder is located in a cul-de-sac and has a swimming pool. And rounding out the list is 28 Lyle Street in Leichhardt, also Sydney, a three-bedder with 2 bathrooms. And then let's go on to the most viewed property on REA Group this week. It's 2 Yarra Grove Hawthorn in Melbourne. Price guide is up to $26 million. And here you can see why. This giant home comes with 5 bedrooms, 6 bathrooms and space for 5 vehicles. It sits on almost 3,000 square metres and includes a direct frontage on the Yarra River. Taking cues from mid-century architecture, the home maximises the water views through vast floor-to-ceiling glass over 3 lift-connected levels. The kitchen is decked out with granite, stainless steel and a cool room. Outside there's a heated pool and spa along with a grass tennis court, and there's a huge deck overlooking the river and pontoon. Expressions of interest close on Monday, April the 3rd. Well, to break down the trends in property this weekend, I caught up with Eleanor Creagh from REA Group a little earlier.
Well, look, it's not as big as the spring selling season, but certainly we have seen auction numbers or scheduled auction numbers rising this week, and they're expected to continue to do so over the next couple of weeks. We're continuing to see clearance rates as well, holding a little bit steadier, a little bit firmer than they were towards the end of last year. And I mean, that is broadly, I guess, in line with what we're seeing in terms of housing conditions picking up somewhat this year. So we saw a rise in national home prices in February, bouncing 0.18%, and actually bouncing across every capital city except Hobart throughout the month of February. We're really seeing that the kind of tighter supply conditions that are out there at the moment, with sellers having fewer other sellers to compete with, and buyer interest really being concentrated on the properties that are listed for sale is underpinning home prices to a degree at the moment.
But there is more stock slowly coming onto the market. Do you think sellers are feeling a little more confident now than maybe a few months ago?
Look, potentially. It's a difficult question to answer, but what we are seeing is that new listings volumes still do remain relatively constrained. And when we look at the total number of properties on market, it is still well down relative to pre-pandemic averages or previous periods in history when prices were falling. And certainly we do think that those lower stock levels that are on the market at the moment are, I guess, providing a pillar of support to home prices to a degree, with that buyer interest really being concentrated and vendors having fewer other vendors to compete with. So certainly that is lending a pillar of support to home prices. We know that interest rates have continued to rise this year, but despite that downward pressure that comes from interest rate rises and that reduction in borrowing capacities, we've still seen that home prices have bounced in February.
Yeah, and the time a property's taking to sell at the moment, what's the sort of rough estimate there?
We've seen that the time properties are taking to sell has picked up in most parts of the country. So it's certainly picked up from the record low levels we saw throughout 2021 and has gradually picked up throughout most of last year and into into this year. So certainly properties are taking longer to sell, but when it comes to the price point at which they're selling, those the tight supply of properties that are available for sale at the moment is underpinning prices to a degree. So certainly as we move forward in the months ahead, it's not just interest rates that are going to be an influence on home prices, it is going to be what happens with listings volumes as well.
This week we saw some data from the Bureau of Statistics basically showing the number of migrant arrivals has returned to pre-pandemic levels in Australia, at least as of the 30th of September last year. But what impact is this new inflow of migrants having on property in general?
Yeah, you're exactly right. And we actually saw that September quarter was a record in terms of net inflows. And actually, if we look at more timely data that gives us a bit of a proxy for those net migration trends, so the net overseas arrivals data, we can see that it looks like that rebound in migration has certainly continued, and that migration will be actually well on track to outpace those Treasury forecasts that we received at the end of last year. Now, in the market to buy, I guess there's less of an impact given that we know that recent arrivals to Australia are most likely to rent, but it could be one of the factors alongside those tight supply conditions that is underpinning home prices at the moment. But certainly where we see the bulk of that impact from the strong rebound in net migration is rental markets at the moment. Rental markets remain incredibly tight around the country. We've seen vacancy rates continuing to drop and really strong rental price growth, again, in most parts of the country. What's interesting is we're starting to see a lot of that pressure that we saw throughout the pandemic in regional markets really shifting to the capital cities, and predominantly the capital cities of Sydney and Melbourne, where we know those recent arrivals and international student arrivals are most likely to land.
Yeah, how many properties out there are available now for under $400 a week to rent?
Yeah, look, and this is one of the other, I guess, really pressing issues in the rental market is that with these extreme price growth that we've seen in the rental market, the supply of affordable rentals is continuing to decline. So the share at the moment is sitting around 17%. It's actually halved over the past year, and it's well down from the plus 40% share that we saw pre-pandemic. So certainly creating real issues in the rental market in terms of really tight competition. It's incredibly tough to find a property to rent, and incredibly tough to find a property that's in budget as well.
Eleanor Creagh, Senior Economist at REA Group, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.